Hey there, this is Mr. Icarus, and welcome to yet another edition of Doom Mod Madness. This time round, we're checking out a mod by the name of GeneTech Before the Storm, and immediately you'll notice a few interesting things going on with the visuals here, namely the fact that all of the enemies are 3D models, as are the weapons that you'll acquire during the course of this particular mod. Now, I know I've made fun of Psychophobia for attempting a similar thing, but the truth is this does it so much better than Psychophobia ever could. For one, I don't get the same sense of visual whiplash with the use of 3D models here, and that's probably helped by the fact that I'm not constantly thinking about what these all look like in the 2D sprite forms, because I've got no visual reference for that. All of these, as far as I can tell, are created or at least tweaked for specific use in this mod's world. That said, the question still remains, why go with this particular style? Why choose 3D models over 2D sprites? And the answer to that lies in the fact that GeneTech Before the Storm is actually intended as a Quake 2 prequel. The mod itself doesn't drop that particular revelation until about halfway through, but it doesn't exactly keep it much of a secret either. The general setup here is that you've been tasked with investigating the eponymous GeneTech Corporation based on Mars, the rumor floating around being that they're consorting with an alien race to develop advanced technology, which is very much against the rules. As you make your way through the facility, you'll discover some very familiar looking weaponry and come across some concerning human mechanization experiments, leading you inexorably to the revelation that GeneTech are being very naughty indeed and consorting with the Strogg. Surprisingly, GeneTech doesn't really bring the Strogg into the fray for quite a while here, instead content to have you battle against GeneTech security instead. And I find this surprising because the Strogg as an enemy is pretty iconic, at least it is to me. It was one of the aspects of Quake 2 that really made me want to play it in the first place, even if I originally experienced it on the PlayStation, which I might add is not the ideal way to experience Quake 2, but the front cover image of that game was an image of the tank enemy, which was big, badass, intimidating, and I just wanted to kick its ass. It was great. So, rather than focusing on having the Strogg as a persistent enemy throughout, you'll find that GeneTech has a really nice sideline in providing a little bit of environmental storytelling to go along with the indiscriminate employee slaughter. As it turns out, the GeneTech labs here on Mars are full of ethically dubious experiments, such as part mechanized monstrosities kept alive in stasis tubes. You'll stumble across operating theaters, such as this one right here, where a poor, skinless husk on the table awaits a mechanical graft. And I think the one thing that really sells all of the creepy, weird shit that GeneTech have been doing here is the fact that the scientists you occasionally have to shoot are plainly psychotic. I mean, the first thing they try to do upon seeing you is not run away for help, but instead attempt to punch you in the face. Now, for me, this is magnified even more by the fact that there are NPCs here that will not attack you, and will in fact flee if you fire your gun while in their presence. There's even some NPCs that you can have a little bit of dialogue with. So, intentional or not, the aggression of the scientists here certainly works in GeneTech's favor in terms of world building. I mean, of course they're doing evil experiments. All of their scientists are expressly mad scientists. So how exactly does it feel to play GeneTech? Well, if I'm going to be honest, it's an oddly subdued experience, and I've been trying to put my finger on exactly why I feel that way about it, because when you get down to brass tacks, the core gameplay here is as straightforward as you can get. You're running around with Quake 2 weaponry shooting dudes in the face. Not much of a surprise, if I'm going to be honest, but maybe it's to do with the structure, the pacing, and maybe even the atmosphere of GeneTech. So to figure this out, let's break it down, shall we? Most of the enemies that you'll be running into during the course of GeneTech are in fact hit scan based. And I know hit scan is a little bit of a dirty word, but there are ways to do it without making it tremendously irritating. For one, the enemies here can be staggered by dealing damage to them, which interrupts their fire animation and means that when dealing with smaller numbers, you can just stand there and pray and spray and things will turn out hunky-dory. But what happens if you're dealing with more numerous enemies and you can't stagger them all with your pea shooter or whatever you have at the particular time? Well, that's where the level design of Gene Tech will come into play, because I noticed that it provides a lot of opportunity to duck in and out of cover, and this is what I feel slows down the gameplay a tad, where rather than being able to go all gung-ho as much as I'd love to, that does not usually result in a favorable outcome. And couple that with the fact that health can become pretty scarce at certain points during the playthrough, you just naturally end up playing in a little bit more of a cautious fashion than you normally would. So how about that other element I mentioned earlier, the element of atmosphere? And there's a few intangible seeming things that go into this. There's the look, which is very clinical and clean in this level. I'm certainly a fan of the bold use of colors here. And there's also the use of soundtrack, which, if you can hear it, is a pretty low, droning, ambient-ish track that puts you in a little bit of a down state, if that makes any sense. But as soon as you pick up this keycard, the old Quake 2 soundtrack kicks in, and boy, do you feel that difference instantly as the Strog stream out of that teleporter at the back. You feel the blood pumping, and you're like, fuck yeah, let's kill some Strog! Rock and roll! It's a breaking of the tension. That's what it is. That's exactly what it is, because there's gonna be a point during playing this, if you're not already aware, where you go, I know what's going on here, and I'm waiting. I'm waiting for all hell to break loose. And it does take its time with finally playing its hand, but when it does feel pretty satisfying indeed. From that point onwards, you may be expecting this mod to be nothing but balls to the walls, you versus Strog action, but that is where you'll be mistaken. Instead, Gene Tech scales it back down to the level of you versus Gene Tech for at least another section, introducing a new weapon or two, and giving you a little bit of breathing room, because that section where you do fight the Strog is just like one great big horde rush, and yeah, it's not something you can sustain for very long before it gets a little played out. It's a good job then that there's a neat amount of variety with the Gene Tech security enemies as well. You've got a whole bunch of floaty robots that will deal pew-pew laser death to you in various forms. You've got pretty much every type of soldier wielding every kind of weapon you can wield, minus the railgun and the hyper blaster, and of course the BFG, and quite possibly my least favorite, which are the spider bots, which occasionally you can find clinging to the ceiling, and also seem to be this mod's version of the chain gunner, and they can go to hell. They can go straight to hell. Do not pass go. Spoilers for the final boss battle of the mod, by the way. If you absolutely positively do not want to know what you're going to be up against here, then this is your opportunity to turn back, because all I'm going to say at this point is you're not facing just a room full of tanks, okay? The tank is cool and everything, quite possibly one of my favorite enemies in Quake 2, but that is not the great big bad of this mod, so the times are coming. You best turn away now. I bet you're curious, though. Probably wondering what exactly it could possibly be. If it ain't a tank, it's gotta be something impressive. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you the slightly bigger tank. And when my poorly timed invincibility wears off, you'll discover that it's a slightly bigger tank with a pretty damn sweet neon blue running light going on there, in the eyeball sockets and just in the chesticle region. It's a very nice design job, I gotta say. Well done, Gene Tech. That is a very stylish death machine that you got going there. You may also notice on the armaments front, this bad boy has a rapid-fire railgun, which I must admit is pure, unfiltered bullshit, but nonetheless there is plenty of cover around here for you to hide behind should the need be. As you can see, this is a textbook example of how not to hide behind cover. I get there eventually. Much like the rest of the mod, this fight is fairly decently paced. As long as you stick to using cover effectively, you'll find that this can actually be quite an enjoyable fight. About midway through getting the health down, you'll get the doors dropping at the side, you'll get tank commanders busting out from the sides, which are the bigger, badder brothers of the standard tank enemy. It also gives you a good opportunity to stock up on a little bit of health and whip out the good old-fashioned railgun. I was wondering when it was going to turn up in this mod, but turns out it's right at the end. Though, considering that I only got 6% secret completion on this mod during my first playthrough, I'm guessing there's probably plenty of opportunity to pick up a railgun much earlier. Another weapon I did spot but didn't use was in fact the BFG, so I can't really give much reference to whether that's any different here, but it did curiously seem to be in a pretty early spot on the map, so it's definitely going to warrant a bit of a replay in my eyes, just to snoop out some of those secrets and definitely see if I can get some juicy stuff nice and early. But returning to the finer points of this particular boss battle, I think this is a good example I can use of something that just doesn't bore the crap out of me, like the boss battles in Umbra of Fate, which I covered in the last video, and that's because this does something interesting with each phase that it goes through. It starts off with the regular tank enemies, unleashes the tank boss, and once you get a little bit down the health of that, it unleashes the commanders to vary up your movement and just make you use the arena and the cover a little bit more effectively. Now, once all of those tank commanders are gone, this boss battle does launch into its final phase, which is where the tank boss brings out its ultimate bullshit weapon, which I'm pretty sure is a BFG embedded in its face. But as with most things in this boss battle, as long as you put a big giant rock pillar between yourself and the enemy, you will be fine and dandy. So, would I recommend GeneTech before the storm? You know what, I think I would. This turned out to be a surprisingly meaty challenge, and one that didn't really outstay its welcome either. It's surprisingly short, all things considered, topping out about 45 minutes on my first playthrough. Doubtless you can do it a heck of a lot quicker than that. It's also pretty visually distinct. I don't think I recall ever seeing this much blue and orange in a Doom level before. And as for the 3D models, as I said much earlier on in this video, they're integrated really well, to such a degree that after a while you just forget that it's a thing. It just works, and is definitely an example I would hold up on how to do it correctly, and how to not have things just clash and look wrong. But in any case, if you're interested in giving this a whirl for yourself, you can find the link, as usual, in the description below. While I'm at it, I'd like to give a great big thank you to my wonderful patrons over on Patreon. Thank you so much for supporting the channel and for helping to make content like this possible. If you're interested in lending a hand yourself, maybe you'd like to see your name in the credits or gain access to new editions of my videos early, you can find the link to my Patreon page also in the description below. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Feel free to let me know what you thought in the comments, and feel free to suggest any mod you'd like to see me cover in future episodes of Doom Mod Madness. This has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.